Ontario doesn't always show off its roots. For better or worse, the province we know today stems from colonization, Europeans coming to this land to extract all they could with little regard for Indigenous societies. Many traces of those early days have disappeared over the years, but in some places, like here in Haliburton, it survives to this day. This log chute behind me looks much as it would have more than 150 years ago when it was first built. It's a testament to how settlers overcame the obstacles of the natural world. But could it, or perhaps should it, stand for more than just a colonial victory? Welcome to the Hawk Lake Log Chute.
The land that would become Canada has gone through several phases since Europeans first arrived. First, there was the fur trade, but then around 1800, lumber began to take over as the dominant industry. Fur prices had been dropping as clothing tastes change, and after years of aggressive harvesting, beaver populations were on the decline. Meanwhile, politics in Europe cut off England from its usual wood supplies, so it turned to Canada to fill the gap. Logging camps began to spread across the country. They often followed waterways for several reasons. Floating logs was the easiest way to get them from the bush to a sawmill, and plus, workers could use those same routes to get to the logging camps. Rivers and lakes were the backbone of this industry for more than a century, but rivers weren't a perfect solution either. If you've spent much time in central or northern Ontario, you'll know that river travel can have its challenges. On relatively flat and deep stretches, rivers are excellent for moving logs. But eventually, you come to something like this. Rapids and waterfalls were the logging industry's enemy. They often caused log jams. River drivers would then have to walk onto the pile and free it by hand, then make it back to shore before they got swept over the falls. It was dangerous and inefficient. So the industry decided to innovate. Rather than driving logs over falls and rapids, what if they could just bypass them altogether? I mean, they were surrounded by more lumber than they could ever possibly need, so it just made sense to use a little bit of it to streamline the process. Enter the log chute.
My name's Carol Moffat. I'm involved in the Stanhope Museum, and I was the lead organizer for the reconstruction of the Hawk Lake Log Chute. The Hawk Lake Log Chute has been in existence here in this location since 1861. Was originally built by lumber companies, and it's been rebuilt many times over many years by either lumber companies or the government. A couple of times it was rebuilt by the federal government, and it was traditionally rebuilt every year to accommodate that year's log drive out of the upper regions of this area. The log slide was invented in Ottawa to circumnavigate the Chaudière Falls by a man named Ruggles Wright. I believe it was 1829, and the invention of the log slide and subsequently the log chute ended up opening up the logging industry in sort of what was called Upper Canada at that time.
It wasn't long before log chutes spread across the province. With that came other changes to natural waterways. Workers covered some shorelines with wood to prevent log jams, and companies built hundreds of dams to make sure water levels would stay high. Even though log chutes existed right across Ontario and beyond, there's very few examples that have survived to the present day. If you know where to look, you might come across the remains of an original log chute, forgotten and left to decay in the forests of northern Ontario. That wasn't going to happen here at Hawk Lake. Volunteers have restored this chute several times over the years, and it's become a sort of time capsule from the heyday of the logging industry.
The reason it's important is because it allowed commerce and economy to flourish in what was at that time a pretty darn rugged environment. But it allowed the commodity of timber at that time to be moved down to mill. It employed thousands of people and really contributed to the economy of rural areas and remote areas early on in the 1800s. When they come to log chute, what I want people to know is how tough life was, and that it took a lot of effort and money and manpower to literally carve a living off of the land. We live in a world of conveniences, and folks who did this kind of work, they didn't have those conveniences, and it was really a hard scrabble struggle to survive.
Loggers had a hard and dangerous lifestyle. Many Canadians have ancestors who toiled in these deadly industries, hoping to establish and support a family for generations to come. It's understandable why the people of Haliburton have wanted to keep this heritage alive in the modern day. But there's a problem. If we only focus on how log chutes were a colonial triumph over the natural world, we could miss the serious harms that this industry brought to this land. That's both in terms of impacts on the environment itself, but also in how the industry impacted Indigenous peoples.
Anin, Ben Cousineau Disneykas, Raman Dojiba, Wabasheshi and Odom. My name is Ben Cousineau. I'm from Emma First Nation. My clan is Martin. I'm the historical researcher for Emma First Nation. Historically, Haliburton's been a traditional hunting territory, harvesting territory for our community for probably thousands of years. We have direct archival evidence of our ancestors talking about the region going back to 1923 and into the early 1800s. So it's been a part of our history for a long time. I guess the period from 1850 into 1923 or so was pretty chaotic. A lot of settlement, a lot of logging, as you mentioned, industry, and things really affected our ancestors' ability to access those territories. Obviously, they've been going there for a long, long time, and without really much change in the environment or the game and the medicines and so on that they harvested. But as industry rolled in, they found themselves pushed off the land. They were forbidden or prevented from accessing their traditional territories. And ultimately, what happens in 1923 is they signed the Williams Treaties, and that inadvertently surrenders the right to actually use the land at all. And that had a devastating effect on our ancestors.
Now, Indigenous peoples weren't shut out entirely. Some logging companies hired First Nation workers, as you can see in this photo. That's Josh Johnson, Herb Irons, and Long Tom Taylor, and miigwech to David Bocage Johnson of Curve Lake First Nation for sharing it with me. But there's important context here. The only reason many Indigenous peoples found work in colonial industries is because settlers had pushed them away from their traditional lifestyles. There came a time when finding work in colonial industries was the only way to survive. Then there were the impacts to the ecosystems themselves. These went beyond building dams and flooding areas or destroying shoreline habitats. The logging industry left scars on Ontario, and it'll be generations before they fully heal. By the 20th century, many former logging sites in Ontario were practically wastelands. That leaves us with a serious question. How do we commemorate something that brought so much good to certain people but caused untold harm to others? As an Anishinaabe historian, Cousineau spends a fair bit of time thinking about that.
History, as I think we all know, is generally told by the people who've been the most successful and the winners, if you will. And for a long time, that wasn't really our people. And that probably extends to First Nations across Canada. And now more and more, we're learning our own histories and we're feeling empowered to tell them in the right way. It's difficult to get everything out there because there's a ton of information that we ourselves are still learning. But as we learn, we want to share and ensure that all Canadians, and I guess the world as a whole, knows who we are, and most importantly, that we're not extinct, that we're still here, and we're still, doing our best to keep our culture and languages and history alive.
Reimagining the stories we tell isn't just a priority for First Nations. The Stanhope Museum, which maintains the log chute, is working through it too.
It's great for me to stand here, or for any of us to stand here and speak the truth and say, yes, these people came and they carved this living, hard scrabble, eking out a living off the land and all those things. But we also need to dig further and continue to find out and learn how literally the colonization of the timber industry disrupted First Nations existence on this land. But that is part of the ongoing research and part of this municipality's commitment to truth and reconciliation is to keep digging deeper. We know that First Nations, all Indigenous history is oral, so it's going to be putting together a very complicated puzzle, talking to the people who do know that oral history, and then unfolding that Indigenous history in relation to these kinds of, I guess, colonial disruptions into the greater picture of the local history. Very important.
The Hawk Lake log chute may have a unique advantage when it comes to big questions like that. This isn't its first restoration, and it certainly won't be its last. The water is constantly pounding and wearing away the wood. It's not something static like a statue or a plaque. As long as people feel this history is worth preserving, they'll have to actively work to maintain it. Every time it gets rebuilt, it's likely going to change just a little bit. That could offer us a reminder that our understandings can be rebuilt as well. This log chute offers us an invitation to re-examine its place in Canada's living history.